All right, I think we're ready. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another session of the 1080 Motion Strength and Webinar series. We are super excited to have an excellent speaker today, a friend of 1080 Motion, Les Spellman. He's going to join me on camera here very soon. I'm Adam Rolfe. I'm coming from the middle of United States. We have an international audience today. We sold out this webinar series, so thank you so much for being impactful in the sense of you want to be a part of this and listen and hear what he has to say. We know it's about Les today and him explaining a little bit of how he uses the technology to really individualize prescription and training and all about speed. One thing I want to mention, just make sure you guys are following him on social media. He is out there. He puts his stuff out there. He really educates people on what he's doing. So follow his links on wherever you do your social media. Also, I wanted to do a little plug for him that universal speed rating is going to be coming out soon, I know. So check that out. So without further ado, we're going to bring Les on. Les, go ahead and you can share your screen and jump on camera here. I will say we will do a little question and answer at the end of this session. Ola Eriksrud with 1080 Motion will also jump on with me, and whatever time we have, we will do some questions. We're going to be here for about an hour. So Les, good to see you, man. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks for doing this, guys. It's awesome. I'm super excited.
We're happy to have another live edition of this. It's been a little while, and we always like great speakers. So thank you for joining us. I hear you. I see your screen. So you're good to go, man.
Cool. Yeah, well, everyone that's on, I appreciate you guys. Like when I was first talking to the 1080 guys about doing something like this, I was like, man, I don't know who's going to sign up. Like, didn't really know, what the market was looking like. And, we got some signups. So I'm really happy to be doing this. It's been a really long journey for me, just for, me coming from being an athlete to a coach to understanding software and technology. And really what I'm going to do today is just share my experience. Like I originally sent like a 70-page slide to Ola, and I could just tell from his response, he was like, that's a little bit too much. So I scaled it back and just talked about one experience that was pretty impactful for me, and just do a case study to walk through it. So I'll start with my story. I don't want to take too much time on this. Essentially what happened to me was April 13, 2007, I fractured my femur, and I was basically told, like, Les, you're not going to be able to run. Walking is going to be difficult. You'll have a cane for a large portion of your life. There's, you're going to be in pain. And I go through this hell period, and obviously I put hell in there, but I went through a really difficult period of doubt, self-doubt, trying to figure it out. And one day I just decided, like, look, I'm going to throw my medication away. I'm going to deal with the pain. I'm going to face this. I'm going to learn how to walk. I go from walking, to running, to actually figuring this thing out. In January 2009, I actually ran for the first time. So I actually ended up running. Wasn't very good, pretty slow, kind of a trot. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to run every day. So I introduced myself into a self-imposed hell period where I focused so hard on running every day, twice a day sometimes. By May 2009, so 5 months, I ran a 10-mile race in 69 minutes, and I was shocked. I just couldn't believe, like, I had a broken femur, I have a metal pole, I have 2 screws in my leg, and somehow ran 10 miles. And I couldn't even run like 2 miles before I had my injury. I was a pretty average high school athlete, and then end up now, like, man, I'm actually pretty decent. So I come up with this crazy idea, like, I'm going to walk on to a Division I track team. And everyone thought I was crazy. They're like, dude, you're going to go from wheelchair to running? Like, how is that possible? And me being like young and pretty defiant, I was like, I'm gonna figure this thing out. So I ended up walking on to Temple University, August 2009, and get to a track team and realize, like, wow, I actually suck at running. Like, I thought I was good. And then I get around these guys that are running 10s and all that. And I just couldn't keep up with them. So I deep dive into understanding why I was slow. Like, why was I not good? Why was I getting beat? Why did I practice with the girls team sometimes because the guys team was so fast? Like, why was I not fast? And chip by chip, I started to knock things down. So got in the weight room with the strength coach, Mark Proto, and he goes, Les, if you can squat 2 times your body weight. So boom, 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 I knock it out, squat 2 times my body weight. Still slow. Then he's like, Les, if you can get flexible. So I go to yoga every day. I get flexible, almost doing the splits, still slow. So I'm like, you know what, let me just YouTube this thing. Let me figure this thing out, bang this out. I go on YouTube, and what do you guys think is on YouTube 15 years ago? Nothing. There's like parachute training, there's toe shoes, there's, it's all types of stuff. So I'm like, look, there's a gap right here because I'm in Division 1 and I can't figure out how to get faster. So long story short, I graduated college. I found a sport called rugby just randomly because I really didn't have much to do. Like right after college, I wanted to keep playing something and I wasn't good enough to run track. Hop into rugby, end up at the Olympic Training Center in San Diego randomly. Got lucky because I wasn't very good at rugby and saw California, saw San Diego and realized like, okay, I want to live here. The next day after our first scrimmage, I get a text from the coach to like, hey, come down here. And I go to his office and he's like, yeah, like we're definitely not going to keep you because you're not good enough. So yeah, figure it out. And what happened was I go to Chicago and I start playing for the Chicago Lions, which is like a club team out there. So while I'm there, I get a job and my first job is a janitor. So I'm cleaning toilets, mopping floors, all that. And it's a great little gig because I get access to a gym. That access to a gym led to an internship, which led to my first coaching job, which led to where I'm at now. So that whole rant right there was basically because I realized there's a gap in the speed market. There really was a big one now. There's a lot of great people involved now. And, there wasn't really anything for low-hanging fruit for people to be like, I can attach to this philosophy and get faster because a lot of it was just so high level. And, going from janitor to where things are now gave me perspective on just how to progress and going from, wheelchair to running to sprinting to being decent at sprinting gave me a ton of perspective too. So I have a lot of stories you guys will know, but like this period was, the most impactful for me. Okay, so today, this is what we're going to do. We're going to talk about acceleration, why I love talking acceleration. Second, we're going to talk about force velocity profiling and how to measure it. I have some practical ways we can just easily plug in. Load velocity profiling is how to prescribe that session. So like how to actually create actionable items. Then I'll talk about some changes that I've had with guys. And then lastly, we'll go to questions. So, I was YouTubing TED Talks on how to give a good presentation. And one of the things in there is like, who cares? Like, why would you care? And truthfully, I care. And I care a lot about this. I'm passionate about it. It saved my life. And I think that right now there's a massive gap between what's happening at elite levels and what's happening, bleeding down into high schools and youth and all that. And really, I think the biggest area of opportunity is to work the development phases. I'm very passionate about development. Elite training is great, but a lot of the guys I might shift them by 1% and be super happy. But the kids, get them into sports, change their lives, get them off the street. That's why I care. Okay, so one of the things that I've really experienced, like I've looked at my time, energy, and capacity, and I realized I'm either experiencing, creating, or problem solving at all times. So experiencing is I'm inside combine training. I'm going through it. I'm right in the mix of it. Creating is I'm creating that process for combine training. And problem solving is this guy just pulled up and he's hurting, his Achilles is hurting, his calf is hurting, his hamstring's hurting, and I have to problem solve to get him to that target. So what I did is I adapted my programming to have clarity around these things and understand when I'm in these phases. So what's not clear is what's being put out in the market. Just run track, technique is everything, speed cannot be built, run on your toes, speed is genetic, lifting makes you faster, running makes you fast. Like there's so much out there, like, and we're debating on, and nobody's really wrong. Like I wouldn't say anybody's wrong because it's their experience, their context, but there's so much out there. It's hard. Like if you go ask a kid, like, how do you get faster? There's no like, oh yeah, I can attach to this philosophy. And, I feel like that's a massive, massive, massive gap right now. So I had to ask myself that question is like, what is my philosophy? So what I did was I reverse engineered what actually happens on the field. So what does speed actually look like? Like if I'm looking at speed, how do I define it? So first thing I did was just look at what does the game look like? How much volume? So how much time are they spending on the field? What is the total distance? How many accelerations, decelerations, changes of direction, high speed runs? Like I wanted to know, like, volume wise, like, how much is actually happening in football versus rugby versus soccer. Because what I was doing when I first started coaching was I went down to the Olympic Training Center. I can't believe they actually let me coach at that point. I was like 24, working with an Olympic team, and I was doing all drills. That was it, just drills. And I was thinking it would translate. And I had some fast guys that made me look really, really, really good because we became one of the fastest teams in the world. But those guys are fast already a lot of times. So, looking at volume, I didn't really understand this at the time. So looking back, I had to reclassify. So volume is how much distance, how much time. Intensity. So within that volume, how intense was that volume? So how many high speed runs, like above 90% did I have, or how many like very, very, very high speed runs, or what was my speeds? Where were my decels? And then I want to look at, like, over what course of time did that happen? So density. Then once I understood that, I was like, cool, now I can look at individual performances because I've covered my bases in understanding the sport and I've learned enough to actually decide that we can go deeper and zoom in. So in order for me to get better and be a better coach, I had to learn how to zoom out. And then now I'm learning how to zoom back in on that individual performance. Okay, so let's dive in. So one of the things that I look at is guys are reaching 40 to 60% of their max speed in 2 to 3 steps, which just tells me that's important. That's all. And I knew this from the jump. I just couldn't classify it. I couldn't quantify it. I couldn't, like, figure out how to measure these early acceleration qualities that are so important in sports. Then we look at some of the best people in the world here. We see that these two guys, the one in orange and the one in red, both have the same top speed, 12 meters per second. So a lot of times when I was talking to athletes and we're talking acceleration, they were thinking a guy with a better acceleration could accelerate longer to a further distance. Like, yeah, that's all true. But in this case, we're looking at somebody that can reach a higher speed, access a higher percentage of their top speed earlier, even though they hit the same top speed around the same time, but he's accessing a higher percentage of his peak speed earlier in that run, which allows him to win this race. So looking at the guy in orange, he's hitting 71% at that 10-meter mark at 8.5 meters per second and 10 meters. Unbelievable. At 20 meters, he's at 10 meters per second, 84% of his velocity. And at 30 meters, he's at 11.4, 95% of that velocity. Both these guys hit the same speed at the same time. At the same place in the run, but they get there at different times. So the guy at the top is going to get to that point faster, right? So this was really important for me to understand, like, okay, how would I look at a sprint from the beginning to the point that they reach top speed? Because if the athlete can't manage that phase, the top speed is not that it's irrelevant, but I'm really focused on how do I get them to that top speed. Okay, so they get to that same point, 60 meters, 12 meters per second. But how do they get there? That was really important to me, especially in team sports. So then we looked at it further. We looked at our guys training for the combine, and we looked at sections. So the first 5 yards, guys are reaching 40% of their velocity, 10 yards, 70 to 80%, 15, 90. So when we started looking at this, we're like, wow, like we have 6 to 8 weeks to change somebody's ability to run over 40 yards or over 30 yards or go back to their team and be fast. What can we influence? When we started influencing velocities, it took us, it takes time. It takes a lot of focus, a lot of time, a lot longer than 6 to 8 weeks. But we could influence the acceleration, their ability to accelerate, especially over those early phases, relatively quickly. So today, I'm going to quickly go through just our starting point and how we look at it. First thing I typically do is learn, which I showed you, the volume, intensity, and density. So learn as much as we can. Who are you? What do you want? Second is assessment. So like, what are the options? Where do we go from here? And then lastly is, which we'll talk about today, is building and creating that framework. So what does this framework actually look like? Okay, within build, I have 3 sections: test, analyze, and program. And at the bottom, it says monitor. So I'm monitoring all the changes that are happening within these test, analyze, and program. So under test, today what we'll talk about is acceleration profiling, so force velocity profiling. Under analyze, we'll talk about identifying the physical and the technical needs. And then we'll talk a little bit on the programming side. So really, this looks really cool. And I put it on Twitter the other day to see the response, and people loved it. But I think looking back, this is pretty terrible. And here's why. Like, I have this at the top right. I had to protect me from me. This took me like 3 weeks to like really design and figure out and make it look pretty and all. It was just too much. Like, looking back, like, I thought this was it. This was the holy grail. But I was wrong. I was wrong about a lot here. So I'll talk about what I was right about first, where let's start the 0 to 2 steps. I was measuring that using an app called Huddle Technique, which I don't think is available anymore, but I was able to measure the ground and air times and build out these profiles. And I was literally spending like, I don't even know, like 6 to 7 hours a day just doing this for every guy and grinding it out. And I was right though, because it was a massively important piece of the sprint. And, looking back, like, I was glad that I did that. Now, if I look at the other pieces where I look at percent velocity reach, velocity attainment, all of that, good. I think it was on the right track. Still took a long time. But if you look at the bottom, this is where I went wrong. So my goal had this guy running a 1.81 fly 20, which he was actually not too far off. But I didn't even look at the second 10. There was like so many things wrong with this where I was like guessing and trying to make up something that looked right, because I was really just nervous about doing a good job. And I was trying so hard to do a good job that I profiled this thing out. Now, here's the good thing. I got very lucky. He actually ran a 4.37. This exact run. It was nowhere near the splits because his second 10 was like a lot faster and his back 20 was slower, but I actually ended up being right. So coming out of this, I was like, I need to find something that I can attach to, a philosophy I can attach to, that I can profile, because I need to stop trying to make decisions, because I'm not a great decision maker. I need to automate these decisions into mathematical solutions. And this is where I came up with this framework. So the first thing that I wanted to do was I wanted to quantify the physical quality. So what quality do we want to influence? And for me, that was force velocity profiling, which I'll dive into in a second. So I wanted to test the physical capabilities of that athlete and see how do they reach that peak speed. Then the second thing I wanted to do was create a load velocity profile, so a prescription. So I wanted to know exactly what load and velocity I need to target, right? So for me, that's mathematical. I can't mess that up. I can't interfere with that. I can't try to be too creative and come up with decisions and all that. No, like, that's mathematical. Now, the second piece of that, the technical quality. Now that's art. That's where I felt like my experiences coaching a bunch of guys, like I felt pretty confident in my ability to influence that technical quality and then decide which gaps are there. Now, what we did, and what you'll see later on in this, is we actually put some objective measures to technical qualities, because again, I got too deep, or I tried to coach and overcoach. So I had to give myself some guardrails on that technical quality. Third, and the last part, is stimulus. So what are appropriate exposures of volumes, intensities, dosages to actually expose them to? So when I'm programming, I have to go through this phase, because if I don't, I'm going to create what I think is the world's greatest program, and it's probably going to be pretty far off. So I need these guardrails to guide me and give me some decision-making power that's based on math, not based on my creative brain. So getting to this, FVP using radar. I put a QR code on here. If you guys want, I'll give you like 30 seconds to a minute. It's JB Marin spreadsheet. Just take your camera out and hit the camera button, and then put it right up to the screen, and then click Safari, and it'll pop up with the whole article in the spreadsheet. I won't do it justice explaining exactly how to use it, because JB does a good job of it. So just grab that real quick as we go to the next phase. Okay, we got it? Cool. All right, so here's the process. So 1080. Why do I use 1080? Honestly, there's a good, better, and best for every situation. So we have, stopwatch, we have lasers, you have GPS, you have 1080, or you have radar, then you have 1080. So for me, 1080 is the most accurate. It gives me the best data, and it's the best software interface that I have. And that's not me selling. I was telling Ola and Peter and those guys, like, I'm not a marketing guy. I'm actually terrible at it, but I just tell the truth. So when we go to the good, better, best situation, when it comes down to our coaching, I typically have high anxiety about doing a good job, and I want to pick that best situation for my guys. So that's why we went out and did the 1080 thing. So on the 1080, it gives me the most accurate data, the best sampling rate that I can get. That's not too noisy. And it gives me an ability to basically look at that and create a curve of their velocity over time and over distance. So the first thing we do is we run 1 to 2 kgs on the 1080. So very, very, very light, almost insignificant. I export that raw data from 1080 into JB spreadsheet, which I had on the last slide, okay? Then what I do is I decide my groupings from force velocity profiling, and then I create a load velocity. So we're actually gonna do this together today. So it's a test, analyze, program. But this is it. This is the whole process. So my groupings are pretty simple. And I'm not going to spend too much time on this part. So if you have questions, just email me or ask after, because how I do it is a little bit of an art, but it's relatively simple in theory. So a test from a static stance, I'm first looking at ratio of force. So how horizontal are they in the beginning part of the sprint? If they're bad, so if they have poor early acceleration, then their program is going to really emphasize correcting that before we go to anything else. If they're average at it, a little bit below average, we're still going to focus on that. Once they get to be pretty proficient accelerating early, we look at, are we going to influence more force-based power qualities or more velocity-based power qualities? And to be honest, we do this we just surf the whole curve. So if I'm training somebody for 8 weeks, we touch on each of these categories. So what's the difference is that I spend more time in each category depending on where guys go. So if you're really, really, really poor early acceleration, we're going to spend more than 25% of the time in that section. We might spend a third of that time or even half of that time correcting it. So more on this later. We'll come back to it. Okay, this is a GPS force velocity curve. So it literally, like what we saw was we're doing it off force velocity. We tested it. Off GPS. We tested it. We tested against 1080. 1080 was giving us better data. So the force velocity on GPS was great. And you guys hear me talk about it a lot. And we still do it from time to time when we don't have our 1080s out on the field. But we're getting better data from the 1080. So figured I'd just be honest about that part. Okay. So the reason why this is important is I'm trying to see the horizontal force part of the resultant force. So how much horizontal force do I have in the sprint? So we know that force, the ability to apply large forces into the ground that are directed in the horizontal vector, are related to acceleration. And when that is gone, when that isn't present in the run, we're typically at top speed. We reached 100% of our velocity. So the goal is to understand how much trace amounts that I have of this horizontal force, because that trace amount tells me I'm still accelerating. Right. So although there's more vertical force within this, and I don't want to get into the debate on this because I'll get trolled, but just because there's more vertical force present within the sprint, even from step 3, the remainder of the horizontal component tells us a lot about how we're continuing to accelerate. So right here at the bottom, you see a force plate where you have the vertical component and the horizontal component. And you see the vertical component be very high and the horizontal component high in the beginning and drop off towards the end as the velocity increases. So what force velocity profiling is telling me is, what is that peak number, right? So what does that force look like in the beginning? Okay. Ratio of force is telling me how did I apply that force early? And then it's also telling me how does that drop off over time? So that gives me a lot of insights into how I reach my velocity. Okay. Again, the goal is not to go through this as much today. It's, just to touch on it. So again, if you have questions, we'll just save them. Really quick. So when I look at force velocity profiling, if one of my kids asked me to draw something, so I spent like 6 hours trying to figure out how to draw it, and I came up with this. So the mechanical properties, if I look at a 40, that early part of that 40 is really emphasized on that ability to apply large horizontal forces. The middle is very focused on my ability to apply power. So that's a combination of force and velocity. So being able to still have some remainder of that force, horizontal force within there as the velocity increases, right? Now, if we look at force application, in the beginning, my ratio of force is very horizontal. But in the middle, I'm transitioning that to vertical. My goal is to really be vertical, like to be able to have a high velocity. So don't get it twisted. Like you're still trying to reach a high velocity. Now, at the back end of it, we're very focused on that horizontal or that vertical force production. Okay. All right. So ran through that. Again, questions on it, we'll come back to it. I want to get into sprint load velocity profiling. So this is where I think there's just so much value on the 1080 and being able to program and profile the athlete. So just a quick background on it. Again, JB Marin's research, Matt Cross, Mihail Cahill, Pierre Samazino, those guys have way more knowledge on this. The way that I explain it to my girlfriend who understands sprinting like 1%, is I say, if you train and you do a load velocity profile, you identify the area where you produce peak power, and then you train at that range and you give more exposure to that range of peak power. And why that's important is that if I'm sprinting body weight and I don't have any resistance on me, I'm reaching my peak power about 1 second. I'm only holding it for a fraction of a second. So it's very little exposure to that power quality, which is going to help me improve my sprint. It's going to help me improve my acceleration. So what we're trying to do is identify the power range, which Pierre Samazino, Matt Cross, JB Marin came up with and said that power range is about 50% of the velocity reduction. So if I run 10 meters per second, I'm trying to identify a load that matches up to 5 meters per second, where I'm running maximally against that load, right? So it's a very similar concept. It's like VBT, but horizontal, right? Okay, so how do you do it, right? So you run a 0% body weight run. I go 30 yards with that. 25% go 30, 50% body weight run, go 20, 75% body weight run, go 15. Originally, we were doing 100% body weight. We realized you really need 2 to 3 quality inputs to get this right. So we dropped 100% and just stuck with 75. Okay, what we do from there is we record the velocities at each load. Okay, so at the end, it looks like this. So you have a trend line, that red trend line. You have the speeds, right? And these are typically correlated with each other. Like if the R squared is above 0.95, it's good data. If it's not, somebody slowed down and didn't give a maximal effort. So this gives us a good trend line. And, easy y equals mx plus b, you can figure out how to get 50%. So I know this is really hard to read. So what I did was, here's a QR code. This leads to my spreadsheet that I created for 1080 and just for this call. Actually, I'm gonna go through it just so we can simplify. So this spreadsheet is just, it's easy. It's super easy to use. I have instructions on here. So this is, just for this group of people. Shout out all these people that helped me create it. I'm not that smart. You can copy this and make it your own. Okay, so really simple. You grab this sheet today, you type in your name, you type in the date, okay, you type in your body weight in pounds. I was 207 this morning. Okay, it gives you your kgs. Height is not as important, but you can add it. And what we've done is we've adapted the percent body weights to the 1080 friction coefficient to figure out what the load is on the 1080. Okay, so you see the load is here. These are 1080 loads. So obviously you can't do 8.5 on a 1080. So what we're going to do is to simplify this thing is we're just going to make it boom. Okay, so you have your loads in your 1080, 8, 16, 24. Okay, now all you have to do is write down the velocities that you reach on a 1080. So I'm slow right now, so I'm going to put 8.9. Okay, then I'm going to put my 25%, let's say it's 7, 50%, let's say it's 5.4, 75%, let's say it's 4.3. Okay, so it's going to give me my velocity decrement, 60, 50, 25, and 10. And I'll go through how I came up with these numbers later. Okay, now if I go to my visualization, what I do is I click my name. Oh, I'll put it under name, sorry. Okay, it's the 16th. Okay, I have my profile, my trend line, my speeds. I'll get into this later where I'm targeting strength, speed, power, speed, strength, technical. I have my load on the 1080. Oh, I need to change this. Okay. All right, and then just because I was bored last night and I couldn't sleep, I put an entire program on here so you guys can use it. All right. So it's got the entire program. I think it's 19 weeks. I would have put 20 weeks, but my daughter woke up. So, it's close enough, but it has your load and it has your target velocity and it's got a distance on it. These are relatively basic. This is from Mihail Cahill. I just took his research paper and I just plugged it in on what I thought was best and put some deload weeks. Okay. So don't want to spend too much time on this, but you guys have that. Okay. Just hit that QR code. Okay. All right. So now this is what I did, right? So I started doing this when I first met Peter, like a year and a half ago, and we're going through it. Me and my homie JP, we're testing, we're doing low velocity profiles on everybody, like literally I did it on someone's mom. Like I'm just testing this thing out, figuring it out. And the reason why is that we were going into combine training. This year we had a number 1, 2, and 3 pick, plus a guy that was potentially a first round, and he had to run fast. So it was very, very, very important for us to understand it. So what happened was we decided it's a COVID year. There's no combine. We're going to spend 12 weeks building this thing out. So what we did was we broke it into sections. The first 4 weeks, we're going to work on power. So 50% VDEC, right? The next weeks, 5 and 6, we're going to drop it in between 50 and 40% VDEC. So we're working a little bit more on the speed side, okay? And then we're going to drop down even further to 30% and work some of those speed qualities. And then we're going to drop off to 10%. And what I did was I gave ranges. So I knew like, okay, in the beginning, it's very heavy. It's very short. What I'm going to do is cluster sets, and I'm going to get this guy ready. I'm going to add some volume on cluster sets. I was talking to Stu McMillan. Stu gave me some great advice and said, it's heavy, so do more reps and go short distances. Cool, perfect. So we did cluster sets, 2 to 3 sets of 4 times 5 yards. Okay, and we did this continuously over time. Then we dropped it down 6 to 8 reps of 7 to 10 yards as the speed got faster. And we have markers. So once they reach that indicator at the bottom, 5 meters per second, 6 meters per second, 7.8, once they hit that point, we moved on to a lower weight. So he stayed at 50% until he hit 5 meters per second consistently. Then we dropped him down to 40%, 6 meters per second. Okay, you got it. So it was great. So here's what it looked like. Okay, so 50, every 2 lines is 1 session. Okay, so I did, like if you look at on the left side, 469, 477, that's the same session. Okay, so it ends up being like 4.5 weeks for the first one. And it ends up being, we just did 1 session a week. Okay, so if you look at 50% VDEC, we did a lot of it. Okay, it was very, very, very heavy for a good amount of time. Now, what happened is if you look at his velocity coming in, it was 906 meters per second. As we're going through this heavy phase, we are dropping his velocity. Like he was not reaching a high velocity. He could not run fast. Like he told me, I feel heavy. I don't feel like I can run fast right now. So what we did was we progressed him through. We start to see his velocity start to change, gets to 536 in that same weight. And we are like, oh, he's breaking through. So what we did when we got to 536 is we pulled back for a week. He hits 9 meters per second. Cool. So then we pull back right into 40% VDEC, which is a little bit faster, a little bit lighter weight. 565, 577. He starts dropping his velocity again. 559, 589. Boom. He starts hitting it again. We pull back on the weight and we let him run. He runs 9.6 meters per second. He's flying. Here's the problem with that. He wasn't ready to run that. He wasn't ready. I had just been doing heavy, and dribbling on the velocity side, not enough exposure to velocity. Although he was faster, he was not prepared from a system standpoint to run that fast. So you see the significantly drop off after that is because he was so fried from that day where he ran 9.6 meters per second that we could not run fast again for like another 4 weeks, 3 weeks, no, 2.5, 3 weeks. So he wasn't hurt. He was fried. And, he had just had his wellness scores were terrible. His CMJ, his RSI scores were terrible. And we're just like, dang, okay, we made a mistake. I can tell you right now, because I put enough distance between it that I can tell you I made a mistake here. So we move on, we go to 30% VDEC. He's hitting his numbers. Now, if you notice, he's hitting his 30% VDEC numbers relatively easy. So he's hitting 7.1 first day out. And the reason why and looking back, another mistake I made is I didn't redo a load velocity profile. So looking back, if I had done another load velocity profile after each phase, I would have had new numbers, which would have given me new targets, right? That was a big mistake. So anyway, we go through this phase, we go to the valley, he starts coming out of that valley. We go into 20% VDEC, he's starting to fly, he's going 8 meters per second. He's starting to go 8.8, 9.5 meters per second for top speed. He gets to 10 meters per second. He's running 9.53 meters per second with the 10% VDEC, which is a light load, but he's moving. And he exits this entire phase at the end at 10.28 meters per second and runs a 4.4. Beautiful. Now, going back into what I started with was looking at problem solving, right? I had to problem solve throughout this. And what I did was from this, I adapted an entirely new model. So here's my new model. I took this from Mihail Cahill and I looked at the reason why I had that guy blow up like that and had that mix is because I went from very heavy to kind of heavy to velocity. And what I wanted to do from there was identify the actual ranges that I wanted to work. So what I started to look at was I want to use very similar terms to how weight room stuff is based. So instead of, starting at, hypertrophy or anything like that, I start with strength speed on the speed side because it's actually lower speed and the guys can handle more volume. So I start with strength speed as an accumulation and I can push it, I can pull it, but typically like in the strength speed phase, we'd start guys off at 60% VDEC and they're doing short reps and we're starting them out for like just a couple, sessions to get accumulation. Our goal is getting to that power phase. So we're working the, weight acceleration qualities, some of the early acceleration qualities, and that's a 50% VDEC. Then we drop down to 25. So we go from 50, we skip 40, we skip 30, go straight to 25. Looking at Mihail Cahill's research, like I would suggest just look at his because he's far smarter than me. It worked, right? We tested it out. It worked. 25 was a great range for us to use. And then we dropped it right down to 10%. So we got to velocity quicker from the standpoint of our entire program. And we're able to get to that velocity safer. So from the training standpoint, you start off, we're really working those early projection qualities with 60% VDEC, strength speed, working those power phases, like somewhere in the middle right there. And you see as the distances get further, the reps get shorter. Simple math there. Okay. So it was very simple to understand. Okay. This is what happened. So this is modeled off of 35. This was taken from 1080. His original through 35 was 4.52. His goal was to be at 4.37 through 35 on the 1080. As you guys know, the 1080 split times are going to be a little bit slower because of that initial start, because it picks up the earliest movement. It detects the earliest movement, which is what you want during training. But as they go to combines and things like that, those first 5 yards are going to be a little bit faster. So we saw a pretty decent change in this kid. So we saw a 0.15 second change over 35 yards. Our biggest area of change actually came surprisingly towards the end. So the first 5 was influenced 0.02 seconds or 1.7%. And you see it progressively get bigger as we go. So total, it was a 3% change in 0.15 seconds. So it was great. Now, from the standpoint of force velocity changes, this is what we saw. So I actually zoomed out. When I first got this guy, I had his data from the last season of his college career. So he played in Pac-12 in his last season. End of fall camp, his coach sends me his force velocity profile using GPS. And that was like our marker. Like that was like, okay, cool. We could always go back to this. He comes back to me in January. So 5 months later, and he had a 7% reduction in force capabilities and a 5% reduction in velocity. So we're like, okay, we know where to work off of. We know where we can probably get you to. But our first goal is to try to return you back to where you were, right? So we used the load velocity profile. We used our training. Our goal is to return him back to where he was at the end of fall camp, because he was not peak. He's pretty tired because they're doing a bunch of stuff, but that's relatively around his peak. So we returned him back to a 9.87 force. That is not typical to return the exact number, but it ended up being the exact number. And this is February 19th, so 5.5 weeks of training. Velocity goes back to 9.54, so we're almost there. And power, ratio force, DRF, all improved. Okay, great. So as you guys know, like combine isn't February 19th. So what we did is this is our week 5 was our first opportunity to see where he was at and see if we return that quality. Now from here, what we wanted to do was add on to the velocity component, which you saw on the previous slide. So you see him get back to 10, he gets up to 10.28, okay? Now, here's what else changed. So 61 days of training, we saw a 9% improvement in hip projection distance, okay? So that just means the distance that his hip travels horizontally from the start, from step 1, okay? I'm looking at step 1 here. So a 9% improvement, which is significant. So that is significant. He was able to project further without adding more airtime, right? So he wasn't taking it from airtime, he's taking it from being able to push fast from the ground. He had a 25% improvement in touchdown distance. So if you look at the graphic all the way to the right, his foot is landing relatively close to under his hip. In the beginning, he was actually landing like in front of that line. So 25% improvement in touchdown distance is pretty significant because he's able to get that leg to retract back into the ground to create a better first couple of steps. He had a 9.5% improvement in initial torso angle. So his exit angle, you look at second picture, was a 9.5% improvement, which is significant. And not just from leaning over, like he was actually able to get there. And then a 9.5% improvement in shin angle, which makes sense because I think those two are pretty correlated at the beginning, 61 days of training. So the big question that always came up after I presented on this kid was like, okay, what happened technically? And like, to be honest, we didn't do a ton of technical stuff. Like we used the 1080, we profiled him, we put him in the bucket that we wanted to work. We did the load velocity profile. We went from heavy to light, and we did a couple drills here and there to emphasize hip projection distance, and that was it. And it was great. So those are the results for that. Next is like looking at the actual programming. So when we actually categorize, like, what are we going to do from a training standpoint, this is how we actually fitted all these components in. So we had our vertical drills, which is our walks, march, skip, switches, just basic postural stuff. We had our horizontal drills. We did a lot of resisted marching in the beginning. And I didn't put this in the presentation because my presentation would have been like 2 hours longer because I'm passionate about it. But we did a lot of resisted marching, and we looked at that force trace on the marching to look at asymmetries from left to right. And it almost became like, okay, guys aren't going to start going heavy on runs and load velocity profile so that asymmetry is under 5% left to right. And we want that to be smooth, hard, sharp hits on that marching. So horizontal drills are marching or classic wall drills, but typically just marching on 1080. Projection drills, we did a series of projection drills like single step band repeats, anything that involves that initial projection. Then we go to resisted accels and then unresisted accels. We progress this is in a session typically. So this will go from, week 1, we'll typically start shoulder resisted because we're working on our torso projection. So our torso torpedo, as Jonas would say, and our ability to really get those shoulders driving horizontally. And then we move towards waist. Our goal is to not have to use drills, but drills provide context and drills give us an idea of where our body should be in space. And our goal is to get to that unresisted accel, but we have to go through general to get to specific. Okay, I'm almost there. I'm almost done here. Okay, now on the velocity side, we had a massive velocity component to this as well. We did our dribbles and overhead series. So our dribbles emphasized our max velocity pattern, gave us an opportunity to understand that pattern in a learning phase before we actually deployed it. So you're getting that motion, you're getting that ability to cycle and to land under your hip and to use the hip without having to run at top speed. And we moved in from there to a light resisted run. So yeah, it's probably like, well, to use overspeed, which I'll get to in a second, but we typically did a light resisted run on this max V day, which was typically around the 10% VDEC range. And that was just to prime our body, get us ready, we still had to get to velocity to run fast. So we're basically activating everything to run fast that day. Then we go into wickets. Our wickets are step over in Dan Paff, Stu McMillan, Altus model. They'll open everyone's eyes to wickets. I'll do a poor job of explaining, but it's a stride length drill. I want to see, can we take that dribble pattern, which looks like a bicycle, and put it into an elliptical pattern, forward and back, and make it horizontal. That's what a wicket allows me to do, because I'm increasing the stride every step. Then we go into flies. So a gradual build up into top speed, and then eventually just a sprint. So very general to very specific. My exit from this is a sprint, and that's my goal. 2-day model, just if you're looking at how we did it, very basic, a velocity day, prehab, warm up, overhead A series, emphasizing hip height. Dribble series, we have dribbles that are rhythm, we have dribbles that are fast, and we have dribbles that are elliptical, so like going forward and back. Wickets, we had different wicket lengths. So each wicket length was not dependent on leg length. In this case, it was depending on speed. So we'd set up 3 per day. And the difference between each of them would be about 1 mile per hour. So our goal was, if you run 22 miles per hour, your goal is to dribble at 19. Your goal is to hit the first wicket at 20. Your goal is to hit the second wicket like 21-ish, and the third wicket at like you're close to your peak speed. In this case, we did light resisted after that because it was part of a circuit, and then we did flies. And acceleration, we just flipped, where we go A series, horizontal drill, like marching, warm up runs, heavy resisted runs, and then free runs. Quick video on this one, and then I'll take questions. This is Zach Wilson, quarterback for the Jets, went number 2. You're probably like, why is he sprinting and prepping for a 40? Couple of reasons. So one thing that we wanted to focus, well, actually, to be fair, we didn't know that he wasn't going to run a 40, by the way. Like at this phase, like there's me with the mask on and glasses. It's the virus time, right? We had no idea what was about to happen or who was going to run or what, like we're just like, we're prepping. But the second piece of that is I would have had him do this anyway, because the highest acceleration rate, the highest forces happened at the start, and getting him in a very low start was just like a special strength drill. Like Stu told me, you don't power clean on a field, but it transfers, right? To me, the 3-point stance, yeah, it's whatever. It takes a little bit of a learning curve to learn, but it transfers because you're working that horizontal projection. So if you notice here, this is super heavy. There's 2 chords on this from the 1080. So that means it's close to 30 kg probably. And we'll just talk through like what we just showed, which is hip projection distance and touchdown distance. So it's overloading his ability to push and then retract that leg and get a decent touchdown distance. Now, obviously, he's not going to have good projection of the hip, but we're getting the right torso angles. We're getting the right focus, which is driving from the hips. And our idea is to try to retract that leg back into the ground heavy. So when you look at the heavy runs from a training standpoint or technical standpoint, every step damn near looks the same, right? So I'm really emphasizing those first 2 to 3 steps and being able to apply large horizontal forces into the ground relatively quickly. So Zach had the highest peak power out of every single athlete that came to us last year. Highest peak power in the 1080. I don't remember what it is, but I can go back and check. So then medium resisted runs. So this is like a 25% VDEC. So it's not very clear, but they're starting to fly a little bit, right? So it's a low risk because they're not reaching super high velocities, but they're able to give a maximal intent against a rope that allows them just to run fast, and we could see their velocities. So it was awesome. This is Miles Bryant, who went undrafted, was practice squad, about to be cut, and now I think he's top 3 in the league in passes defended right now. Okay, and then lastly, we have light resisted. Didn't show very well. But light resisted, they feel like they're running normal. Like they just feel like they're flying, right? We did light resisted 2 different ways. We did one of them was just regular, where they just run light resisted. And the second one was accommodating resistance. Both helped us with our velocities. So the accommodating resistance was we'd start out with like very low, maybe 5 kgs. And once they hit a certain threshold, the resistance would kick in and it would be heavy, like 15. So they'd have to really work that middle phase from already moving at a high speed, which was awesome. They helped our guys jump velocities up significantly. I didn't go too deep into that today because there's a lot from there. Like you can go from heavy to light, light to heavy. And then the last piece is obviously overspeed. So a lot of people ask me, especially after I posted that video yesterday, I had a guy doing overspeed at 23.7 miles per hour. We only had 2 guys run overspeed. And the reason why is that most of the guys hadn't learned how to accelerate, number one, to a top speed. And second is they technically weren't able to do it. And third, I was just afraid at first, but I've gotten more comfortable with it. I've started to implement more overspeed. And what I like about overspeed is that on the 1080, it can be very light. I was just like completely against it at first because I was like, I don't know. And then we started testing it out on ourselves, and like, it's a gentle pull if you set it the right way. Obviously, you're not going to yank yourself 10% faster from day one, but having just a little bit faster, like 1 to 3% was significant. And we started off with the guys this year is dribbling with the overspeed. So we did overspeed dribbles into a top speed run. And my friend Peter actually gave me a rip cord, which was awesome. So we would dribble. You would get up to about your peak speed from a dribble. So very low energy cost, save you on the acceleration side from the energy expenditure side. And then once we got up to top speed, you'd rip and you'd finish the run. And it was a cool way to practice mechanics without getting us into an extremely fatigued state, and we can get more reps in. So that's my overspeed pitch. I don't want to debate on it. I think it's a useful tool. I didn't use it out of anxiety more than anything. Okay, coming to the end, last slide here. Very, very, very simple philosophy here. Start 4 phases. First one's accumulation. So very heavy, sometimes push in this phase, sometimes just marching in this phase. Our priority is early acceleration and dribbles for velocity. So next, go to force-based power. It's more late acceleration qualities and dribbles for a higher speed. And we're doing a little bit less on the volume side for resisted. Moving into velocity-based power, late accel and velocity. We're doing even less volume of heavy resisted runs, and we're increasing the volume of light. And then last, we deload from heavy into light and just fly. So that's my presentation, guys. Appreciate you for sticking on this long. It looks like the participants actually grew as we're going on. So that's a rarity.
That was cool. That was cool. Hey, real quick, because we have about 5 minutes. I know Ola has some questions lined up. Will you put the QR code up? Some of them missed it on your slideshow. Yeah. So while you're talking, they can get that snapped on. That would be very helpful. I think specifically the one to your Excel sheet was the one, the question we had.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, cool. There you go, guys.
Yeah, there you go. Very, very cool. Very cool. Ola, you got a question for him?
Yeah, we only have time for a few, I think, but one here. You obviously use a lot of velocity profiling for some of your programming here. Do you also take that, how you program based upon the velocity decrements? Do you also use that to some extent in like regular weight room training or other?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So originally when I sent you that presentation, I had like all these slides up about how we influence in the weight room too. So I can just show it really quick here. So in the weight room, we try to look at profiling from the standpoint of field and weight room separate. And then sometimes the qualities are exactly the same. So sometimes we're working the same qualities in the weight room, and sometimes it's a little different. So what we came up with was this flow here. And I can go back to that screen in a second, where we looked at our force-based power and velocity-based power guys based around the force velocity profile in the field. And then in the weight room, what we were doing was JB Marin's 2-jump test, a CMJ, and 50% trap bar jump. Ryan Grubbs at Liberty is an expert at this. I literally just hit him and he'll give you some details. But we wanted to decide from a weight room standpoint, what was the priority? Are you strong enough? Like from an actual physical total force standpoint, are you strong enough? If no, then let's get stronger and let's put some parameters around that. So when we say get stronger, this is Ryan Grubbs again, came up with these phases of squat cycles: absolute strength, strength, speed, optimal power, speed, strength. This is all Ryan here, and then attached velocities to it. So very similar, to answer your question, is very similar theory, but sometimes it would be different. Like some guys would be decent accelerators, or some guys would be really strong in the weight room, but not have the other quality, because they're correlated, but the higher the level they go, the harder it is to find that correlation sometimes. So there are times where they were different. I'll go back to that screen.
Yeah, I believe Ryan is on, but he's muted, but shout out to Ryan there.
Yeah, shout out Ryan. That dude, I call him all times of night. So shout out Ryan for sure.
And also another one here from JB. And I think I hope everyone realize how much work actually goes into all that you've done here, Les, and sharing this so openly with everyone. It's brilliant.
Thank you.
So that comes from JB, and that should have that has a great meaning. I would like to say.
I really appreciate JB. Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
He's also muted, so he can't say anything to his defense, but that's all right. There came in a question on overspeed, but you obviously answered that one. Here's one on gender. You don't care about gender. You just use the profiling, male, female, differences in programming.
Yeah, that's a good question. And JB will probably answer it better. But what I did, is I worked with women's rugby for a long period of time, is like it's hard to find like normative values, because how you capture the data for force velocity profiling would help determine the profile. So to give context, if I use split times versus radar versus 1080, it might be slightly different in the values. Yeah. And then it also might be slightly different to that sport and that population. So if I had enough people on a team, then I just kind of use that team as a marker and use standard deviation on that team to decide which qualities were stronger or weaker based around that team profile. And if I could find something, like JB's obviously put out like a ton of research on it, and I would just kind of guesstimate like a range. So like, what is, for example, like a question comes up is like, what is a good force, or what is a good velocity? And it's like a kind of subjective answer. It's like you kind of have to do a little bit of research to figure out what is good in that environment, which is why, it's not completely robotic and automated. Like a computer is not just running this whole thing for you. It definitely takes a little bit of like understanding of the subject. So yeah, it's I definitely would adapt the ranges for women for sure.
No, and you bring up a very important point there, because sometimes you test people and you don't know, is this good? Is it not so good? How do they compare to others? And sometimes in science, it's not very appealing to actually put out reference data, but I find reference data extremely appealing, because then you have something to compare to, and you touched on that there. For the sake of time, gents, I think there are more questions here. And everyone is saying brilliant presentation, yes. Amazing work. If I'm going to summarize, I will not have time to do all of them, Les. So obviously the audience appreciated everything that you presented today. And I support that brilliant presentation. And for those of you who are watching this later, this was a good one. So any last comments, Adam?
Yeah, Les, awesome, bud. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. Please reach out to Les, guys. I mean, he's Spellman Performance, right? Spellmanperformance.com. He's doing a lot of things. He's a mover and shaker in this area. You're going to hear more from him in different conferences. But we have 1080 Motion family. Les is part of that, so we want to support him. Please check out his other website that's coming out, the universalspeedrating.com. So if you're interested in that, please see what he's doing. Follow him on social. He's very active. We're going to wrap this baby up. We're going to hope to get some more questions answered by Les. When we do that, we will announce to everyone this recording is going to be available on our website, 1080motion.com. Same way we've done all our webinars. We have a lot of great ones in the past you can learn about too if you want to learn more about 1080 and just from great speakers. So Les, thank you, man. Ola, good job on the questions. All the people behind the scenes. Shout out to Peter. I know you guys didn't see him today, but he's there. Don't you worry. And you guys have a great day and make speed happen.
Thank you, guys.